Orders, Commander.
How many times must I tell you? Mind the nerdish gap! We all...
All right, and we're back again. So, welcome everyone this week to the Mind the Nerdish Gap. Again, this is my son Dante. My name is Jay. Dante, you get to kick us off.
All right. So I wanted to start off today's episode by asking you first. So The Boys season 4 teaser trailer is out now. And I kind of wanted to just pull out one question from that because I mean it brings up a lot of questions.
Right,
but
absolutely.
I wanted to kind of extract one thing from that just for today's show. In that, so we definitely saw what is presumably a new Black Noir, right? I don't know how much he's going to get featured this season or anything, but just to start the speculation, who do you think it is? Do you think that they're going to go with the Homelander clone route, or
Right. So, spoiler if you haven't read the comic.
right?
So, in the comic, Black Noir is actually a clone of Homelander, and actually most of the worst things that Homelander did were actually Black Noir messing with Homelander and doing it.
Right.
So I actually think that is where they're going with it.
Really?
I do think it's going to be his clone, and then they'll give them a couple different options on how they're going to take Homelander down, because Black Noir was the one that took Homelander down in the comics.
Right.
Right.
Well, and it kind of introduces other kind of cool possibilities of like kind of maybe not changing too much of what we've seen like probably in like the first 2 seasons of The Boys, but it would kind of give them like a window of opportunity of like, hey, that Homelander that you saw in this scene, you thought that was the Homelander you've been watching this whole time, but that was actually this clone.
The Black Noir clone.
Yeah.
And I think at the end of the trailer, the whole bit where Homelander's like covered in blood and then he does the evil smile thing, I think that's the clone. So I think that's where they're going with that.
Yeah, if they do go that direction, I mean, things are about to get so fucked up.
Right, because now you don't know what you're going to be able to trust and everything once they do the reveal and everything. But yeah, I think that's where they're going with that. So what do you think? Do you agree, or do you think it's going to be different?
I'm trying to think of like what would be another path that they could take that would kind of be more interesting than the whole clone idea, because I like the idea of it being a clone and everything, but like I don't know. I don't know if I want it to run so much in parallel with the comics to where like now we would just know essentially all of what's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the thing for me that makes me like not really want it to be that. Just because like I don't want to be able to predict the rest of what's going to happen. But at the same time, I think it would be really cool to see that story told in this live action format and everything.
Right.
So it's difficult. It's difficult for me to say like what I would prefer, but yeah, I don't know. With what's been revealed so far, it's hard for me to commit to like a theory because they haven't really shown us anything of Black Noir that would they haven't shown us any more action that Black Noir has taken.
Right, just the one scene where he's being revealed.
Yeah,
right?
they've only given us the one scene of like kind of him being revealed and like just other little hints here and there, like a Black Noir sign being up when he should be dead. So it's like, why is there still signs of him up?
Right.
And so that, yeah, it's hard to say. Like, I don't know if they're just gonna kind of go the route of like Vought mega corporation just trying to cover their tracks by just basically putting any random person in the Black
Oh, in the
Noir
Black
suit.
Noir costume.
Right.
Yeah.
Like it could be something like that,
Mm.
or like, because that's really the only other pathway I see that they could take besides the clone route. But then it's like that pathway seems a lot less interesting, and a lot like that there wouldn't be as much that you could do with that storyline if that were the case.
Well, and I think they're going to do quite a bit, a few different things, because like I don't remember him ever having a kid in the comic. Do you remember him having a kid?
I don't believe so,
And
but
then
I
there's
don't
like
know.
one scene where it looks like his kid smacks somebody into a wall, and
Right.
like
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
obliterates them. So there's that and everything. But I think, at least in my thinking, is that they're trying to set up that there could be somebody as badass as Homelander to
Mm,
take him out. And think about it, if you think kind of the Invincible route, the clones, part of what makes the clones uh, so powerful is they don't know which one's the clone.
right.
So it could be very easy that they could go the route of Black Noir, even though he's a clone of Homelander, being told he's the original Homelander, and it's his job to take Homelander out covertly.
Mm, yeah.
That would be different too,
Yeah.
because in the comic, I'm pretty sure he knew he was a clone,
Yeah.
but he was supposed to basically keep Homelander under control by doing these crappy things and making Homelander think he was crazy.
Right. Yeah. Um yeah, and I mean like with a lot of the other things that they've set up, I feel like they're definitely leading down a lot of the direction that like the comics went in.
Mm-hmm.
Um but I'm still wondering just like how much so are they going to like is it going to be like a direct adaptation, right? Because like
Right.
um for example, um like Victoria Newman's character is Vic the Veep from the comics,
Right.
but like
But I don't
a
think he had
lot different.
powers
Yeah,
though.
he didn't have
That's
powers,
right.
and like he definitely didn't have like the head popping and like
Right.
shit like that.
Right.
So like that's one part of it that's like intriguing to me, is like they have this character that kind of acts the same as Vic the Veep, in the same position as Vic the Veep,
Mm-hmm.
but has powers and like could, for all we know, end up being the thing that just kills Homelander. Like we
Right.
don't
And
even
they
know.
highlighted her in the teaser, so she is going to be
A big part,
a big
yeah.
part of it. And now, because we know, thanks to Gen V, not only does she have the head popping skills and things like that, but that she's also got the
The
virus.
virus,
Yep.
yeah. Yeah, so yeah, it's definitely really interesting. I feel like that we're still gonna end up getting to the point where Victoria Newman is like in the Oval Office, but
Mm.
I don't know like what's gonna go
Because that's the
down.
storyline in the comic, is Homelander ends up in the Oval Office.
Right, yeah.
Right. So maybe that's part of how they're changing it. She's going to be the one that ends up being president instead of him, because
Mm,
it'd be very easy for her to pop the head of her running mate
right.
once they win, and then of course assume control and say, I need to protect everybody from the soups because they're attacking us again, because that's what she did before,
Yeah.
right? So she's already got a precedent of popping heads publicly to make it look like soups are behind it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm really excited for season 4. It's gonna be crazy. But yeah, so my second question, kind of revenge of the teaser here, because we've just had like a bunch of teasers getting released over this past week.
Right.
Um, but I kind of wanted to talk about the Fallout series a little bit. Um, so first, are you a fan of the idea of Fallout being a series as opposed to like just games? And does it look intriguing to you from what you've seen?
Yeah, so I think the problem is I don't really have a horse in the race on that one. When
Mm,
I played Fallout, it was the top down version, and turn based and all that stuff. I
right.
know with you and your brother, it was the 3D fully first person shooter effectively version of it. And I think I tried to play it once and didn't really resonate with me and everything like that.
Mm.
It looks like they're trying to be game accurate. The problem would be is since I've never really played the game, I wouldn't know if they're being game accurate.
Mm.
But but then the alternative, of course, would be Halo, which I did play a lot of that, and I couldn't even make it to the first episode of Halo because that was so far off the mark. It was like, this is just bad, and I don't think I've heard anything good enough to go back to it. So yeah, it's tough. The Last of Us seems like they did a really good job with it. Resident Evil, they never seemed to quite be able to pull that off. And the Resident, I don't know if you ever watched it, but the Resident Evil show that was on Netflix.
It was Welcome to Raccoon City, right?
Well, that was the movie, but they actually did do a Resident Evil show as well. And it started out, the first episode was actually pretty good, but man, did it like jump the shark after that and everything. Man, and they had so much potential, but they just went like every possible direction that you could be wrong. they went with and everything.
Yeah.
So I struggle with this. I struggle with, you have a content, you have a mythos to work from and everything, but then you want to do your own thing and kind of tell your own story. And that's, I guess, my biggest challenge is they always want to try, or it feels like, even with the Resident Evil movies, they wanted to try to come up with their own characters and everything to be the central focus rather than the ones that are in the comic. But then they realize, well, if we're going to draw the audience, we got to bring the comic ones in. So then it just becomes fan service.
Yeah.
So it's a struggle. I would hope after the success of Last of Us that these creators and producers and stuff like that could see their way to trying to be close enough to the original intent, but then they can kind of, like with the boys, kind of go their own direction, kind of clean up some things and stuff like that. Because I mean, let's be honest, the boys comic is not a really good comic.
It's
really kind of just bad, trashy,
very shock value,
and not really much for the stories and things like that. So I think they were able to really do something with that and take the the thinking behind it and the concept behind it and do something more with it. And in general, a lot of games, even though they quite a few of them do build up a world and things like that, it doesn't translate directly. So I can see taking the initial promise and premise, and then expanding on it. But it just seems like when they adapt them, they just go left field more often than not.
Yeah, well, and it's a hard balance, I feel like, for a lot of these filmmakers, because like there's like the pathway that you can take where like it's too much of an adaptation, and then like it kind of just becomes a worse version of the original like work, right? So like, let's say if they tried to adapt Fallout New Vegas into film, and then it comes out and it ends up just kind of being a watered down version of the same story of New Vegas. It's like that's trying to find the balance between that and being something that's just like completely new, but like kind of using the skins of everything that this property has. And I really hope that they've struck a good balance with this series, because it's like, yeah, I don't want it to be another Halo the series,
or like World of Warcraft. Think about that. The movie World of Warcraft, it was very game accurate, but it was boring.
Yeah, well, yeah, with that one, I think it was honestly a case of like just telling the wrong story. Right?
They chose the wrong one to do.
Where it's like for example, in this case of Fallout, it's like if you were doing a direct adaptation, it would probably be better to try a New Vegas as opposed to a Fallout 3, because Fallout 3, even though its narrative is very focused and very linear, it is kind of just a worse story than Fallout New Vegas. And so it would be like just kind of the worst choice. Like in that case, they kind of just went with like the worst story to
the most
to try
boring.
To tell. Yeah,
it's like I don't know, Burning Legion or Lich King, something like that would have been a better choice. But yeah, they went with the most boring of all of them.
Yeah, and so like at least in my case, I'm a fan with the idea of it being a series. I'm not sure if I'm going to be a fan of the execution of the series.
Well, and that's what it usually comes down to.
Yeah, and like I think that it looks intriguing, but kind of like what you were talking about, it feels like it could, especially just with what was shown in that trailer, it feels like it has the potential to fall down the route of like this is very fan servicey, because
Mm.
like some of the things that they showed in that
Showed
trailer,
like the ghouls and stuff.
well, the ghouls and stuff, like the creatures and stuff, that's fine, because that's stuff that, like, they're just wasteland creatures that you would find out in the wasteland. But
Right.
like it kind of like we're showing like the Brotherhood of Steel, and showing like the Pridwin, which is the big airship that they show.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that's really prominent in Fallout 4, but Fallout 4 takes place in Boston, while
Mm.
this takes place in LA somehow, right? And so
Okay.
it's like things like that like kind of don't quite add up for like people who have the game knowledge. It's like
Mm.
you're showing me this thing, but like it's not in the right spot, and like I don't know if the characters that were attached to that in the game I know of are going to be
Mm-hmm.
the same characters we see here, right?
Mm.
Like it just brings up a lot of questions that like I hope they have good answers for, because otherwise it will probably just end up feeling like kind of a fan service thing of like, we have this here, ooh, look at it, you remember this from the games, right? And
Right.
it's like,
Yeah.
I don't want that. Like,
Right.
have a defined story reason for this. But
Okay.
yeah, so those are my two questions.
All right. Well, so we're gonna get right into some spoilers here, spoilers and theories about Invincible season 2.
Yes, spoilers.
Yep. So something I figure probably won't get much coverage is Alan's story,
Hmm.
and how he was betrayed. Why do you think Thaddeus, did betrayed him after assigning him to find the spy? What's your theory?
Yeah, so Um, I should have rewatched this sequence before we recorded, but one of the things that I thought of was, um I think the reason Thetis did that was because he's trying to essentially push the Viltrumite war further along than where it already is currently. So what I think the main reason that he did that to Alan was to kind of have a reason, or like kind of like empirical proof in some sense, that the Viltrumites are like kind of like a force to be reckoned with,
Oh, to put
right?
the fear so
And
that he could rally the troops and give them a
exactly. So
cause.
like so
Oh.
he kind of created that whole situation in front of the whole console and everything,
Mm-hmm.
because he wanted to create a scenario where it was like, all right, we're about to investigate if these Viltrumites are actually a threat. Lo and behold, they
Here's
are
proof.
actually a threat. Here's proof, because they just killed Alan,
Right,
right?
in front of everybody, and Alan's
Yeah.
supposed to be our best defense against them.
Exactly. Like Alan is supposed to be this defender that knows everything about what's going on, and like, would be able to be the only thing that would really be able to stand up for the coalition of planets against the Viltrumites. Now that he's just dead and has
Mm.
been killed in front of everybody, like now I feel like that presents Thetis the opportunity to go back to the council and be like, look, they really are a threat, and they really are like, trying to
Uh,
dominate the universe. We need to do something to directly counteract that. And that's how I think that they're going to build into Alan actually coming back and
mhm.
like being stronger than he was before,
Right.
because they're going to have more of a reason now of like, look, like this Alan clearly was not strong
And so
enough
now we'd really
to
need to put
defend
double our
us.
efforts to make the super Alan. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
So in the comics, and this is kind of the spoiler thing from the comics again, he turns out to be a Voltramite,
Yeah.
right? And
Hmm.
so, but I think your theory still works because he essentially turned his back on his people, but he probably feels that the coalition isn't taking it serious enough
Yeah.
because after Alan, they kind of went, even though they knew Alan could maybe go toe to toe with one Voltramite, okay, but clearly he wouldn't be able to go against any more than that. So
Yeah.
either you need an army of Allens or you need to make Alan more of a badass. So
Right.
by doing this, I think I could see your theory that they're gonna have to double their efforts to make Alan even better and potentially make more Alan's to have a chance.
Yeah.
So I agree with that theory. I like that a lot. I didn't think about that, but I do like that a lot. So speaking of him, though, did you recognize Peter Cullen's voice, aka Optimus Prime?
I recognized it at first, and I didn't know. I like couldn't tell. It was kind of like itching my brain. I was like, "Man, who is this?" Because
Right.
like I've definitely heard this voice before. But then it was it was when he said the line of the "you open will to survive." Like when he said
Right,
that, I was like, what?
exactly.
It was like right at that moment, I was like, "That's Optimus Prime."
Yep. Because they actually basically had him give an Optimus Prime line. I think that was on
Exactly.
purpose. So.
Yeah, it was like it sounded so much like Optimus. But the thing that's really cool to me about him kind of having a similar cadence to Optimus, but playing this character,
Mm-hmm.
is that he's essentially playing like he has Optimus Prime's voice, but he's playing Megatron. Which is
Right,
just
kind
something
of,
that's
yeah.
really interesting to me because
Yeah.
he's playing the Great Betrayer, which is
Right.
essentially the
What
same role of
makes
Megatron.
Megatron interesting.
Yeah, so I just thought that was a really cool moment when
But
I
I guess the
realized
part of
that.
it, like we talked about before with villains and quality villains, he feels justified in his actions. So he may be betraying Alan, which is a small price to pay in order to
For
save
to save the
everybody else.
universe,
Right.
right?
Whereas
Yeah.
Megatron was just kind of power hungry, right? So
Yeah,
I
true.
must have power.
so but that's awesome. That's very cool. I like that. I like that a lot. All right, so staying on the nostalgia theme, I watched the big return of David Tennant as Doctor Who, and I enjoyed it. I loved how it felt like a mix of the old and the new,
Mm.
but I know a number of people have problems with some of the writing. So what did you think?
Yeah, so I really like it. It feels honestly kind of like a return to form for
Mm-hmm.
Doctor Who for me because it feels like uh you have just the right amount of corniness,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like just the right amount of like just stupid like you see it on screen and you just can't help but chuckle to yourself, right?
Right.
Like you had just the right amount of like that sort of thing going on, but
Mm-hmm.
then also these moments that sometimes they felt a little bit rushed through. I'll admit, but
Right.
like then you had these moments where it was like confined, just like tensity that was like really intense, right? So like the difference between like the complete the complete corn fest of the Meep turning evil and
Right.
being like, "Oh, to hell with this! Just die!" Like
I
from
can't
some
do this anymore.
exactly like from something just like stupid corny like that to
Yes.
something as serious as like the doctor's running in a circle in this spaceship trying to keep it from launching, and then one of his companions runs in there and the
Right.
door shuts, and you can just feel from
Mm-hmm.
Tenet in that moment how serious that is of like why does it have to be this, like
Mm-hmm.
why does she have to be here in order for
Right.
this to like to work itself out.
Right.
And that was just something that was like it was just so cool to see moments like that in Doctor Who, and I feel like that's one of the things that Doctor Who is just historically has been really good at, is like taking really cheesy moments
Mm-hmm.
and having the writing build up in a way to where even though there may have been a couple cheesy moments to get to
Mm-hmm.
this point itself is very serious and
Suddenly,
very
yeah.
like suddenly very just intense,
Yeah.
and I really like that. And I think one of the things that, because I'll just call it now, I know that one of the things that people were probably upset about was the whole binary,
Mm-hmm.
non-binary thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that that portion of the episode and like that kind of arc
Mm-hmm.
was well written, and
Right.
I did enjoy that part of the episode specifically.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I can kind of level with other people on though in not enjoying as much
Mm-hmm.
was that they're like with that whole sequence, right? You have it established and set up, and even the characters themselves say the doctor isn't a man or a woman
Right.
or anything in between. It's just the doctor
Mm-hmm.
essentially, right? And
Right.
the doctor can be anybody. The
Mm-hmm.
doctor can be male or female, or non-binary, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I liked that. I I wasn't too much of a fan that like they had to have the characters kind of just like word it out for us and like hammer it home in that sense, because
Right.
it was kind of, it felt kind of handholdy in that way, where it was
Right.
like, I already get what's going on. I don't need you to really tell me like, oh
Mhm.
yeah, the doctor isn't just a man or a woman. But then the thing that kind of made me a little peeved was just the idea that directly after that sequence, they have Rose and Donna
Mhm.
like holding hands and like, you know, letting the time energy flow through them and everything.
Mhm.
And one of the lines that they say is something close to around this, where they're like, "Oh, we wish that you had stayed the female doctor
Because then you'd
because
understand.
she would understand this more." And
Yeah.
that was the thing to me that was kind of like, didn't you just establish that like it
Mhm.
didn't matter whether the doctor was male or female, that it's just the doctor, and that
Right.
like the knowledge that the doctor has would just continue on with the being itself?
Right. Right.
It's not like the male doctor has different knowledge from the female
Female
doctor,
doctor.
right?
Right.
And so that was one of the parts to it that just kind of made me like raise an eyebrow a bit. It was kind of like, like, are we really doing that right now?
Right.
um but yeah, so that was the thing that I feel like, you know, I'm not entirely sure. I'm sure that the internet in general was probably just mad at the whole binary non-binary
Binary
thing,
thing.
but like in this case, like I can definitely level with it, where it's like, let's not establish a writing bead that's like really powerful and really impactful, and
Mhm.
then just kind of slap it in the face directly afterwards by like
Right.
by saying
Right.
something that is completely opposed to the information we just learned, right?
Right.
So yeah.
Yes, I think you're right. I think that's kind of their miss. That's the one thing I agree with you too. They kind of missed the train on that one when they
Mm,
decided to write themselves into a corner by saying that, you know, he didn't understand because it's a he. So
yeah,
yeah, it's like, as a female, you'd understand. You can just let it go.
yeah. Yeah, it
Okay,
was just like,
Frozen, I get it. We'll just let it go. All right. Well, moving on before we get ourselves in too much trouble on that one. Uh, so talking about we'll go into our comics topic. So it occurred to me the other day that it's a great time to be alive for manga fans.
mm,
You know, when I was a kid, it was hard enough to get the books. Not to mention, you know, now all the hottest books are available as series on the streaming services.
mm.
Right? So I think it's amazing. So the question comes up, I was thinking about this. What are you watching right now as far, because I know you're a big manga fan as well.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. I feel like lately I've been like kind of consumed by like you know, comic adaptations and just like other adaptations in general.
Mm-hmm.
Um you know, between you know, House of the Dragon and Invincible and the recently with Loki and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Those have been like the recent series that I've kind of been like,
Capturing you.
yeah, like kind of focused on. But yeah, I do agree that like it's kind of crazy, just like the shift we've seen, where it's like it's almost more valuable nowadays to just get like a Crunchyroll subscription or
Mm,
something like that, as opposed to like going and trying to find your favorite manga from like a bookstore or whatever,
right.
because there's just so much option, like what you're
Right. There's so
saying.
many options now.
um,
Yeah.
and it's kind of funny too, because like um I wasn't really introduced to manga through manga. I was introduced to it like through anime
Mm-hmm.
adaptations, right?
Right.
Like for example, one of the big ones from when I was little, Trigun.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was like one of
You're
the
right.
first animes I watched, and it
Right.
was based off of a manga, but I
Right.
didn't know that when I was younger.
Oh.
And it's just kind of interesting to see that, because it also makes me wonder like how many, you know, kids, teens, young adults or
Mm,
whatever are out there nowadays that their first experiences with a lot of these
right.
medias isn't through the books or through the mangas. It's like just through
series,
these adaptations and these series and stuff like that.
like Death Note, because I know there was another one
Yeah,
that you enjoyed and you
Death
didn't know it
Note.
was a manga. Yeah.
Right, yeah. Yeah, and it's just really it's really cool. The one thing that I feel like could potentially be like an issue with that is that like I wouldn't want it to get so kind of oversaturated to the point where like kind of like what I was saying with like the Fallout series.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't want someone's first experience with a media form like that
Mm-hmm.
to be the worst form of it, which could possibly be one of these like animated adaptations or whatever, right? Like I wouldn't want someone's first experience with it to be the worst one, and then their impression of that series or of that media becomes just negative overall because they only have the experience with this.
They only have the anime, so they don't know that the manga was better.
Right, like that sort of thing. Like that's one thing that I get kind of worried about with the like the whole streaming age and everything, just because like things can very easily and quickly become oversaturated like that. And I just wouldn't want that to happen. But yeah, no, it's I feel kind of like privileged from the position that I've come from because I feel like you know, a lot of the anime adaptations and stuff that I've seen, I kind of go into it, at least at this point, knowing whether or not it's like the worse or better like version to like partake in, right? And I think that that's something that like would be valuable for anybody who's like wanting to kind of jump into that space is like do a little bit of background knowledge and like kind of try to make sure that like would you prefer to see this in TV form or would you prefer to see this more in the book or in a comic form or what have you, right? But yeah, it's just I think it's amazing as well. Like it's just really crazy the kind of age we're moving into where it's like everything can just be kind of shown to you on a screen. Like whether there is a little bit of fear in that, but it's also just really cool. Like it feels pretty consistently now that like I'm just kind of living in this like nostalgic weird limbo ground of feeling like a kid again, but then it's also like nah, like we're in a new age where this is why this is even able to happen,
right?
And yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah, I think so. It's funny you bring up the fears. I didn't think about that, but I guess my biggest fear would be sometimes some of the best mangas, the anime version just doesn't take off. So then from the point of view of maybe your generation and stuff like that, it just ended, and they don't realize that there's a manga,
that there's more story
that picks up, where the anime maybe left off, that finishes out that story and gets you where you like to be and stuff like that. So it's a lost opportunity,
right?
Because they're just like, oh well, that one just kind of ended, open ending. I'll just move on to the next thing, right? And so then the opportunity is lost, and they don't realize that the source material is already right there, ready for them to enjoy. So that's very cool. All right, well, still end up kind of be a little bit shorter than usual, but I think it's still good. Again, thank you, Dante, for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you all for watching us. Again, I'm Jay, and you've been watching Mind the Nerdish Gap. Talk to you later.
Peace out, everybody.
All right, bye-bye.
Orders, Commander.
How many times must I tell you? Mind the Nerdish Gap!